he said, therefore whoever shall violate one of the least, at least in verse 19, violate least these commandments, will be called, should violate one of these, it should be, teach men also, will be called little in the kingdom of the heavens, but whosoever shall practice and teach them will be called great in the kingdom of heavens. For I tell you that unless your righteousness excel that of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall never enter into the kingdom of the heavens. So you look at that from people who don't understand what the kingdom means. Well, that's, if it's salvation he's talking about, well, that's salvation by works. He just said your righteousness has to excel. He's not talking about salvation. He's talking about inheritance. And so here, and he goes back into this in time of Matthew 13, verse 40. He said the enemy, in verse 40, is therefore the darnel is gathered and burned in the fire. So will it be at the end of the age, which is his millennial reign, the Son of Man will send forth his messengers who will gather out of his kingdom all seducers and iniquitous persons and throw them into the furnace of fire, and there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then will the righteous and the resplendent as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. And so these people here that are intermarrying, they are typifying when men sleep, what's going to happen? And the tribulation period, there's going to be a big sigh of, oh, it's finally over. Let's all face it. We've all been through, I know I have, been through some bad times in life where emotionally, physically, spiritually, you're spent. And you get to a place where you just say, you put your guard down. And if that happens, then what happens is then you put your guard down, you kind of get a bit of relief. It's normal, but you got to stay vigilant, because then you don't sense or discern that which you normally would, and you let somebody come in, or a comment slide, or a thing or an action be done that ends up festering and festering until later on you're like, oh no, it's too late. And that's what happens with the darnel and the wheat. Let them come in, they have their foothold, they produce offspring, and now they're half Jew, half Gentile. You can't take them out. They're hybrid offspring. You can't take them out. That's it. And so you have this same thing happening in the New Testament. He talks about it in Matthew, darnel and the wheat. He talks about it here. But I want to also go into one more thing. It's going to be ahead of our schedule, but I wanted to show you the Jezebel piece of this to remind you. So go back to 1 Kings in chapter 21. Because Jezebel's behind a lot of this. She's still alive today in this comment here. And as you look into this, 1 Kings 21, in 1 Kings 21 it says in verse 23 and 24, and of Jezebel also spoke the word of spoke the Lord, saying that the dogs shall eat Jezebel by the walls of Jezreel. He that dies of Ahab in the city, the dogs shall eat, and him that die in the field, so the flowers of the air shall eat. Then over back, and you go to 2 Kings, chapter 9. What happens? In verse 30, when Jehu comes to Jezreel and Jezebel hears of it, in 2 Kings chapter 9, verse 30, just talking about her right now, even though I'm ahead of you in another chapter here. She painted her eyes, her face, and and she well prepared her head and looked out her window as if to go, oh, Jehu. Really? Like it's going to make a difference. You're going to die. And so, remember, by the way, who Jezebel was. Again, she was of a Canaanite offspring. She was strong, she was beautiful, and she was extremely intelligent. So she was kind of like Naaman back in the days of Ham. And women of the Canaanite line, they came out because they had the angelic line in them. They were beautiful, they were smart, and they were strong. Not to defend the man who fall for them, but you pretty much have, you got no shot as a guy going against that. So she's beautiful, strong, and I think so. I think she was. It's the only shot she's got. You got to turn this guy against God, because the judgment's coming. That's what I think. Many think either that, or they say, oh, she was just readying herself for death. I doubt that. That's not how the Canaanite people go. I mean, the hybrids, they don't go down that way. They go down with a fight. And so Jehu enters the gate, and she said, had Zimri peace, who slaughtered his master, lifted up his voice to the window and said, who was on my side? Who? And there looked unto him 2 or 3 eunuchs, and he said, throw her down. So they threw her down, and some of her blood was sprinkled on the wall and on the horses, and he trampled her underfoot. And when he was come in, he did eat and drink, and said, go visit now this cursed woman and bury her, for she is a king's daughter. And they went to bury her, and they found no more of her than the skull and the feet and the palms of her hand. Yeah. Wherefore they came again and told him, and he said, this is the word of the Lord that he spoke by the hand of his servant Elijah the Tishbite, saying, in the portion of Jezreel shall dogs devour the flesh of Jezebel, and the carcass of Jezebel shall be as dung upon the face of the field in the portion of Jezreel, so that they shall not say, this is Jezebel. And that's why, again, go to Revelation, and how does Jezebel have a say in our days today? Well, it doesn't stop here. We see with the church in Thyatira, another statement of fact. So we go into this here, we go into verse 18 of Revelation chapter 2, and the messenger of the congregation of Thyatira, which is they did purple exchange. That means they were people of kingdom understanding. He says this as the eyes of the flame of fire and feet like brass. I know your works in love and faith and service and patient endurance, and the last works be more than the first. But I have this against you, because you have let alone the woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess, and she teaches and seduces servants to fornicate and eat idol sacrifices. And I gave her time that she might reform, but she is not disposed to reform from her fornication. Behold, I will cast her and those committing adultery with her into a bed, into great affliction, unless they reform from her works. And I will kill her children with death. And all the congregation shall know that I am he who searches reins and hearts, and I will give you to each one according to your works. That's not funny. So I can tell you right now, he mentions Jezebel right there in the letter to the church of Thyatira. He mentions it again, and the prophecy from under Elijah manifested with Elisha. And there's Jezebel again, rearing her head, because what was she behind spearheading? The adultery. She was spearheading the intermarriage. She was the beginning of the intermarriage and interweaving of two different people. She is the type of the peoples that Satan uses her, as he did with Naaman. He's like, fine. If Satan would have a narration out loud, he would have said, fine, have your flood. Kill all the giants. Kill all my hybrid offspring. It's okay. I got a secret sauce. I got Naaman with him. It's just a matter of time. When I got out the ark, it was happening all over again. Gotcha. And God's like, yeah, but I ordained all that, so got you. So it doesn't, I'm not surprised by that. So why would God ordain that? It's crazy. But he does. And yet, Satan works in that way. Did it back then in the days of Noah. He does it again here in Israel. Does it again in the future. It never stops. It never stops. It never stops. Intermarriage, interweaving is what caused all this. So it's caused all of this. Hatred and malice and bloodshed and death. Yes.
Pam said Hillary.
Hillary, yeah. Yeah, I know it's kind of sad but funny, but yet not funny. So as we're ending more time, just to, we'll take it up in 2 Kings chapter 9 and get back together on, remember there's no more Fridays for the holiday break, so we'll be back on Sunday. Or, wait a minute, this is Thanksgiving week. Happy Thanksgiving in advance. I almost forgot. This is Thanksgiving week. So we'll close and pray, and we'll convene later. So Father, we thank you for this opportunity we have to gather with you. Thank you for your love, your peace, your grace, your provision that you give to each one of us. Help us to be steadfast with you. Help us to be vigilant and watchful, and not to fall asleep, and not to have the enemy have a foothold in our life and our minds and our hearts. Help us to be diligent to seek you, to know you, and to understand you, and to see more of the diligence that we have, not a mind of our own, not a choice of our own, not a life of our own, but we have everything is on borrowed time, because we are your servants, your people, your creation. We belong to you. And so our thoughts are not our own. Our opinions are not ours. Our actions don't belong to us. We are here to do your bidding, here to represent you, here to think like you, walk like you, talk like you, to do what you want us to do, regardless of how the world sees us, how people want to judge us. We're to, in love, in peace, live, be, and do what you require of us. Help us do this all the more as we have been given such a great understanding of what's out ahead at risk. Not just the loss of you not being pleased with us or loss of reward. Oh no. So much more is at loss for us. Inheritance, intimacy with you, a place and time to know we can abide with you in the heavens. So much at stake. To be a part of the Ariston, the Dipnon, be included as part of being faithful and wise, being well-pleasing to you as those who can enter in and be called your bride. So much at stake. All we have to do is trust and obey, for there's no other way, as you give us the song to be happy in Jesus, but trust and obey. So we thank you and ask you to continue to help us to be faithful to you. Give us strength, give us encouragement. Chastise us where you need to, but please encourage us, lift us up. Remind us that we fall 6 times, we get up 7. That you are there with us evermore. Thank you for your love. Be with us throughout the week. Give us happy Thanksgiving. We're always thankful and grateful to you for all you have given, are giving, and yet to be given to us. For you are a God of love and peace to us. We thank you in Jesus, Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. All right. So did I bore you, Steph?
No,
I'm just
no,
kidding. No, I'm kidding. That's a joke.